The night 18-year-old Amelia Carter got married, she wore a white wedding dress she had never chosen. She stood in front of a mirror inside a luxurious mansion in Charleston, South Carolina, staring at herself with tears running silently down her cheeks. The dress was beautiful. The diamonds around her neck were real. The flowers filling the room smelled like roses. Everything looked perfect. Except Amelia didn't want to be there. And the man waiting downstairs was 60 years old. His name was Richard Blackwood. He was one of the wealthiest men in South Carolina, owner of hotels, farmland, construction companies, and several businesses Amelia had only ever heard about on television. He was also a widower. No, that wasn't completely true. Richard Blackwood had been married 6 times, and Amelia was about to become his 7th wife. But what terrified her most wasn't his age. It was something one of the housemaids had whispered to her less than an hour before the ceremony. Sleep in the blue room. Amelia had laughed nervously. Why? The woman looked toward the hallway before answering. Because none of the women who slept there ever stayed in this house. Then she walked away. Amelia thought she was joking. She wasn't. Amelia had grown up in a small town outside Charleston. Her father, Daniel Carter, had died when she was 14. After his death, Amelia and her mother, Rebecca, struggled financially. Rebecca worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Then 3 years later, everything changed. Richard Blackwood appeared. At first, Amelia thought he was simply helping them. He paid Rebecca's medical bills, he cleared their debts, he bought them a new house, he even paid for Amelia's college tuition, but there was a condition. Rebecca had to sign a contract. Amelia didn't know what was inside it until her 18th birthday. That evening, Rebecca sat Amelia down at the kitchen table. Her hands were trembling. "There is something I need to tell you." Amelia immediately noticed the envelope beside her. "What is that?" Rebecca pushed it toward her. "Your father's debt." Amelia frowned. "My father didn't owe anyone that much money." "Did? How much?" Rebecca swallowed. $480,000. Amelia stared at her. "Father borrowed money from Richard." Richard nodded, "and he couldn't pay it back." Amelia felt her stomach tighten. "What does that have to do with me?" Her mother began crying. "Everything." She opened the envelope. Inside was a legal agreement. At the bottom was Amelia's name, and beneath it was a marriage arrangement. Amelia's hands began shaking. "No, Amelia, no." She pushed the paper away. "You promised me I could go to college. You still can. You promised me I could live my own life." Rebecca covered her face. "I'm sorry." Amelia stood up. "You want me to marry him?" Her mother didn't answer. "He's 60. I know. Has 6 wives. I know." "Then why would you do this to me?" Rebecca looked at her daughter through tears. "'Cause if you don't marry him, we lose everything." Amelia stared at her. "Then let us lose everything." Her mother shook her head. "You don't understand." "What don't I understand?" Rebecca whispered. "Richard doesn't want the money." Amelia froze. "Never wanted repayment." "Then what does he want?" Rebecca looked directly into her daughter's eyes. "He wants you." Wedding took place 2 weeks later. There were no friends from Amelia's school, no classmates, no college celebration, no young people dancing. Instead, the mansion was filled with elderly businessmen, politicians, lawyers, and members of the Blackwood family. And 6 women, Richard's wives. They stood together like statues. Evelyn, 58, Margaret, 52, Helen, 49, Diana, 45, Catherine, 41, and Rose, 37. Amelia looked at them. None of them smiled. Richard approached her. He looked surprisingly calm. "Beautiful." Amelia said nothing. "Learn to love this family." She looked into his eyes. "I don't want to." Richard's expression changed, only for a second, then he smiled. "You will." During the ceremony, Amelia noticed something strange. Every time the priest mentioned the word forever, the 6 wives exchanged nervous glances. Then came the vows. Richard placed a ring on Amelia's finger. The ring was enormous, an emerald surrounded by diamonds. Amelia looked at it, then she noticed an inscription inside. A.B. She frowned. Those weren't her initials. Before she could ask, the priest continued. "Do you take Richard Blackwood as your husband?" Amelia looked at her mother. Rebecca was crying. Amelia looked at Richard, then at the 6 wives. Finally, she whispered, "I do." But the moment she said it, one of the wives, Rose, dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor. Everyone turned. Rose looked terrified. She whispered something. Amelia couldn't hear her, but Richard did. His face suddenly became cold. "Take Rose upstairs." Men immediately grabbed Rose by the arms. Amelia watched in horror as they dragged her away. "Where are they taking her?" Richard smiled. worry about her. But Amelia couldn't forget the look on Rose's face, because Rose had been staring directly at her and silently mouthing two words: "Run, Amelia." Amelia soon discovered that being Richard Blackwood's wife wasn't what she expected. He didn't beat her, he didn't lock her in a room, he gave her expensive clothes, a new car, a private bank account, a personal driver. He even hired professors to teach her at home. But there was one rule: she couldn't leave the estate without permission, and she couldn't speak to outsiders about the family. At dinner, Amelia sat with Richard and the 6 wives. The atmosphere was uncomfortable. Nobody spoke unless Richard spoke first. One evening, Amelia finally asked, "What happened to your previous wives?" The room became silent. Richard put down his fork. "Sitting right here." Amelia looked at the 6 women. "But I heard you were married before." Richard smiled. "They're all alive." Evelyn suddenly looked down. Amelia noticed something. Every wife wore the same emerald ring except Rose. Rose was missing. "Where is Rose?" Richard's smile disappeared. "She left." "Where?" "That is not your concern." Amelia didn't speak again, but later that night someone slipped a note under her bedroom door. She opened it. Only 4 words were written: "Blue room, 2 a.m." Amelia stared at the message. She remembered the maid's warning: "Don't sleep in the blue room." At exactly 2 a.m., Amelia left her bedroom. She walked through the dark hallway. At the end was a large blue door. She opened it. Inside was a study. Old photographs covered the walls. Amelia stepped closer, and then she froze. There were photographs of Richard with each of his wives: Evelyn, Margaret, Helen, Diana, Catherine, Rose. But there was something strange. Each photograph had a date, and underneath each woman's name was another date: 1979, 19,871,980, 4, 19,921,980, 8, 1997. Amelia's heart began racing. Then she noticed something even more terrifying. There was a photograph of a woman who looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same smile, same small birthmark near the left eyebrow. Amelia picked up the photograph. On the back was written, "Sarah Carter, 1978. Amelia dropped it. "That's my mother's name." A voice came from behind her. "Yes." Amelia spun around. It was Evelyn, Richard's first wife. She was holding a candle. "Who is Sarah?" Evelyn looked at her. "Your mother." Amelia's breathing stopped. "What?" Evelyn stepped closer. "Richard didn't choose you because of your father's debt." "And why?" Evelyn whispered. "Because your mother promised him something 20 years ago." Amelia rushed to her mother's room. "Who is Sarah?" Rebecca turned pale. "Where did you hear that name?" "Answer me." Rebecca sat down. Then she began crying. "Your mother was Sarah Carter." Amelia stared. "You are my mother." "I know." "Then why was that photograph labeled Sarah Carter?" Rebecca wiped her tears. "Because Sarah was my sister." Amelia froze. "My aunt." Rebecca nodded. "Your biological mother." Room seemed to spin. "What?" Rebecca revealed the truth. 20 years earlier, Sarah had been married to Richard Blackwood. She was his first wife. But Sarah disappeared shortly after giving birth to a baby girl. That baby was Amelia. Richard believed the baby had died. Rebecca had taken Amelia and raised her as her own. "But why?" Rebecca cried. "Because your mother discovered what Richard was doing." "What was he doing?" Rebecca looked toward the door. "He was collecting women." Amelia's face went pale. "Collecting?" "Richard didn't marry those women because he loved them." "Then why?" Rebecca whispered. "Because every one of them knew something about him." Amelia stared at her. Business empire was built on stolen identities, forged wills, illegal land transfers, and secrets. Rebecca continued. "Each wife eventually discovered something. Then they were forced to stay." Amelia shook her head. "But they're still alive." "Then why can't they leave?" Rebecca looked terrified. "Because Richard owns their secrets." That night, Amelia returned to the blue room, but this time she wasn't alone. Evelyn was waiting. "You know now," Evelyn said. "Tell me everything." Evelyn took a deep breath. "Richard has been preparing for this marriage for 18 years. Amelia's blood ran cold. "Knew you survived." "How?" "Your mother wasn't as careful as she thought." Evelyn opened a drawer. Inside were dozens of documents: birth certificates, medical records, photographs, court papers. File labeled Amelia Carter, age 3. Amelia opened it. Inside was a photograph of herself as a child. Richard had been watching her for years. "But why marry me?" Evelyn hesitated. "Because your mother took something from him." "What?" "A key." "What?" Evelyn looked toward the ceiling. "Attic." Amelia looked up. "There is an attic." Evelyn nodded. "No wife has ever been allowed inside." "What's there?" Evelyn whispered. "Everything Richard has been hiding." At midnight, Amelia and Evelyn climbed the stairs. They found an old wooden door. There was a lock. Evelyn produced a key, but before she could insert it, a voice echoed behind them. Looking for something, they turned. Richard stood at the bottom of the stairs. He wasn't angry, he was smiling. Amelia's heart pounded. Richard slowly walked toward them. "You finally found it." Evelyn stepped in front of Amelia. "Leave her alone." Richard laughed. "Always been dramatic, Evelyn." Then he looked at Amelia. "You want to know the truth?" Amelia said nothing. Richard pulled a small box from his jacket. Inside was a photograph. It showed Sarah, Amelia's biological mother. Beside her stood a younger Richard and another man. Amelia recognized him immediately. Her father. Richard handed her the photograph. "Your father wasn't my debtor." Amelia looked confused. "He was my partner." Her mouth opened. "Father and I built this empire together," Richard continued. "Then he betrayed me." "What did he do?" "He stole something worth more than money." Amelia whispered. "What?" Richard looked at her. "You." Richard revealed the truth. Amelia's father had discovered that Richard was involved in a massive financial scheme. He wanted to expose him. But before he could, he disappeared. Sarah tried to expose Richard. She failed, and then she vanished. Rebecca took Amelia and ran. Richard spent 18 years searching for her, not to kill her, not even for revenge. He wanted something Amelia didn't understand. A document. Her father had hidden evidence inside Amelia's birth records, evidence that could destroy Richard. "Document is inside your original birth certificate," Richard said. Amelia stared at him. "Where is it?" Richard smiled. "With you." Amelia immediately realized something. Her mother had never shown her her original birth certificate. Richard had been looking for it all these years, but there was another problem. The 6 wives knew where it was, and they had been waiting for Amelia. Suddenly, the lights went out. A loud crash came from downstairs. Richard turned. When the lights returned, Evelyn was gone. So was Amelia's mother. And the attic door was open. Amelia ran upstairs. Inside the attic were hundreds of boxes, photographs, documents, letters, bank records, passports. Then she saw it, a small wooden box. Her name was written on it. Amelia Carter. She opened it. Inside was her original birth certificate, and beneath it was a flash drive. Amelia picked it up. Then she heard footsteps. Someone entered the attic. Amelia turned. It was Rose, the missing 7th woman. Except Rose wasn't afraid anymore. She smiled. "I knew you'd find it." Amelia backed away. "Where have you been?" Rose closed the door, preparing. "What?" Rose looked at the flash drive. "To destroy Richard." Amelia stared. "You?" Rose nodded. "I was never his wife." Removed her wedding ring. Underneath it was a tiny recording device. "I'm an FBI investigator." Amelia's eyes widened. Rose explained that she had been undercover for 3 years. She had married Richard to gather evidence against him. But the investigation had stalled because there was no proof connecting him directly to the crimes until Amelia arrived. "Your father left evidence that can bring him down." Suddenly, a voice came through the attic door. "Richard, open the door." Rose looked at Amelia. "Whatever happens, don't give him the drive." The door began shaking. Richard was trying to break it down. Rose grabbed Amelia's hand. "There's another way out." They ran toward the back wall. Rose pressed a hidden button. A section of the wall opened. Behind it was a narrow passage. Amelia stared. "Where does this?" Smiled. "To the truth." Passage led beneath the mansion. They emerged inside an underground room. There were computers, hard drives, files, surveillance equipment, and photographs of hundreds of people. Amelia looked around. "What is this?" Rose answered. "Richard's real business." It wasn't hotels, it wasn't construction, it was blackmail. For decades, Richard had collected secrets about wealthy people and politicians. Then he used those secrets to control them. The 6 wives weren't prisoners because they knew his secrets. They were prisoners because Richard knew theirs. But there was one final file. Sarah Carter. Amelia opened it. Inside was a video. Her mother appeared on the screen. Sarah, her biological mother. She looked directly into the camera. "If Amelia is watching this, it means Richard found her." Amelia began crying. Sarah continued. "Need you to know something." Video paused, then resumed. "I didn't abandon you." Amelia covered her mouth. "I was protecting you." Then Sarah revealed the shocking truth. She had never disappeared. She had been alive all along. And she had been working with the FBI, but there was more. Richard wasn't Amelia's biological father. He had lied about everything. Amelia's father was actually the man standing beside Sarah in the photograph, the third man. The man Richard claimed had been his business partner, and that man was still alive. The door suddenly opened. Amelia and Rose turned. A man walked in. Amelia recognized him from the photograph, her father, Daniel Carter. He was alive. Amelia couldn't breathe. Dad, the man looked at her. Tears filled his eyes. Amelia, she ran toward him, then stopped. Why did you let me believe you were dead? Daniel looked broken. Because Richard was going to kill you. Amelia shook her head. You let me marry him. Daniel looked at Rose. We had no choice. Do you mean? Daniel explained that the marriage had been part of an FBI operation. Richard's lawyers had hidden evidence so carefully that they needed someone inside the family, someone Richard trusted, someone young enough to be underestimated, someone who could access the family's private records. Amelia stared at him. You used me? Daniel shook his head. No, he reached into his pocket. We protected you. Then he handed Amelia a second flash drive. This contains the truth about your father's death. Amelia looked at him. Who killed him? Daniel looked toward the door. Before he could answer, a gunshot echoed through the mansion. Everyone froze. Rose grabbed Amelia. Stay here. Amelia heard something else, a woman scream her mother. They rushed upstairs. Richard stood in the main hall. Rebecca was beside him. The 6 wives stood behind him. Richard was holding a gun, but he wasn't looking at Amelia. He was looking at Rose. You should have stayed dead, he said. Rose raised her hands. It's over, Richard. Richard laughed. No. Then one of the wives stepped forward. It was Evelyn. She looked at Richard. It's over. Richard stared at her. Evelyn pulled out a recording device. We have everything. By one, the other wives stepped forward. Each had been recording Richard for years. Richard's expression changed. For the first time, he looked afraid. Then police sirens filled the night. Dozens of officers surrounded the mansion. Richard looked at Amelia. You think this changes anything? Amelia stared back. You lost. Richard smiled. No, he pointed toward her. You still don't know why your father really disappeared. Daniel stepped forward. I disappeared because I chose to protect my daughter. Richard laughed. Ask him who your real mother is. Amelia turned. Her mother stood silently behind her. Rebecca was crying. Richard smiled. Ask her. Amelia looked at Rebecca. Mom, Rebecca couldn't answer. Daniel lowered his head, and then Rebecca finally spoke. Your mother? She stopped. I lied. Amelia's heart sank. What do you mean? Rebecca looked at Sarah's photograph. Sarah was not your mother. Amelia stared. Then who was? Rebecca whispered. Evelyn. Room went completely silent. Amelia turned toward Richard's first wife. Evelyn was crying. Amelia stared at her. Evelyn nodded. I gave birth to you. Amelia couldn't move. But why did you let me believe Rebecca was my mother? Evelyn looked at Richard. Because Richard had been searching for you. Then she revealed the final secret. Amelia had never been chosen because of her father's debt. She had never been chosen because Richard loved her. She had been chosen because Richard knew she was his first wife's daughter, and he wanted to use her to gain control over Evelyn's inheritance. But there was something Richard didn't know. Evelyn had secretly transferred the entire inheritance into Amelia's name when Amelia was born. The marriage contract wasn't Amelia's prison. It was actually the trap that would expose Richard. 3 years later, Richard Blackwood was sentenced to decades in federal prison. His empire collapsed. The 6 wives finally walked away from the mansion. Rose received a commendation for her undercover work. Daniel and Sarah helped expose the network. And Amelia, she went to college. She studied law. She became an advocate for women trapped in coercive marriages and abusive family systems. But she never returned to the Blackwood mansion. At least, not until 3 years later. One rainy afternoon, Amelia received an envelope. There was no return address. Inside was a photograph. Showed Richard sitting alone in prison. On the back of the photograph were 6 words. You still don't know everything. Amelia turned the photograph over. A small piece of paper fell out. There was a name written on it, the 8th wife. Amelia stared at the words. Because Richard had only ever admitted to having 7 wives, she immediately called Rose. Happened, Amelia whispered. I think Richard had another wife. There was silence on the phone. Then Rose said something that made Amelia's blood run cold. Amelia. What? We found her. Amelia's heart began racing. Where? Rose paused, then whispered. She's been living across the street from you." The call ended. Amelia slowly looked out her apartment window. Across the street stood an old woman watching her. The woman raised her hand and smiled. Amelia's phone suddenly rang again. It was an unknown number. She answered. A man's voice whispered, "You should never have opened that box." Amelia froze because she recognized the voice, Richard Blackwood. But Richard was supposed to be in prison. And that was when Amelia realized the story had never really been about the 7 wives. It had always been about the secret Richard had spent 60 years protecting. And Amelia had just discovered it.